What Once Was Mine, Chapter 18, Rapunzel and Gina. While you might think that year after year of talking only to herself and inanimate objects, and the occasional would-be-a-thropped pet, would make Rapunzel mad with desire to communicate all the things that had been building in her skull for the last 19 years, well, you would be right. But on the other hand, everything Gina said was literally new information for her. Rapunzel was fascinated. Flynn's been working with the Stabbingtons this season. Dumb of them if you ask anyone, of course. You can trust Flynn about as far as you can throw him. But the Stabbingtons are dumb as a box of cold drops. They're good for pounding things and people, mostly people, into dust. No skills at all in sneaking or talking their way into anywhere. That's why they needed to team up with a thief like Flynn. Rumor has it they had a big heist, something at the castle. It's why all the wanted posters are up everywhere. He's been helping them loot the royal treasury, one treasure at a time. I don't know much about this sort of thing, Rapunzel admitted, thinking about her crown. So this was its origin story. But the name Stabbington sounds like someone you might not want to deal with. Oh, big time no. Even Hookhand here won't cross him, Gina agreed, gesturing at the man. But rumor is that Flynn did double-cross them, I mean. He took the treasure and took off. The Stabbingtons are after him. We find the Stabbingtons, they find Flynn, we get to Flynn before their daggers do. Easy peasy meddler squeezy. You sound like you've been, thugging for a long time, Rapunzel said with admiration. Actually, you're my first paying gig, Gina admitted. You're too young, they say. You're a girl, they say. How am I supposed to get job experience if no one will let me in on a job? Literally the only thing I've wanted to do my entire life, and it's a boys' club. You've wanted to be a villain your whole life? Rapunzel suddenly wondered if that was a polite thing to ask. Not villain, adventurer, Gina said, not taking offense. Living by the speed of my mind and on the edge of my blade. I was always running away for adventure, even back in the orphanage. Oh, man. She laughed, slapping her thigh at a memory. I was always diving out the window, tiptoeing on the railing. Yeah, that place was the worst, but it definitely honed my sneaking skills early on. Know what I mean? Absolutely, Rapunzel said, wishing that were true. And you grew up there? At the orphanage? Nah, I was adopted. My mom's, a nice lady, an old good wife, lives in the forest. She doesn't do well around other people. Not an adventurer. A hermit? Rapunzel said in amazement. She wondered if there was a tower involved. I'm adopted too, but I didn't come from an orphanage. Yeah, it looks like your adopted family has a bit more money than mine, Gina observed with amusement, looking over Rapunzel's dress. After they finished their drinks, Gina made Rapunzel get a vase. She could tell that the other girl wasn't used to pub life. The thug grabbed her own sack and a few more weapons, and they set off toward a twilit road. Their plan was to search all the spots where the Stabbingtons are known to hang out, find them, follow them, and thus find Flynn. The first hideout was a small cave, dark but dry, with broken ale jugs, rotted bits of leather in the corners. This was very satisfying for Rapunzel. It looked just like what she imagined a ruffian's camp would be, down to the candle nubs on the ground. The second place they searched was a decaying woodman's shack deep in the forest, spooky and filled with spiderwebs. Neither Gina, as brave as a Valkyrie, nor Rapunzel, innocent of the world, hesitated at barging in. The third was a colorful, noisy inn at the edge of the forest filled with music and shouting. Gina would not let Rapunzel go into the cheerful place, to her surprise and intense disappointment. I think you're some sort of a lady, Gina explained, and really, it's not fit for a lady. What about the snuggly duckling? I went in there just fine, Rapunzel demanded. This place is even less, lady-appropriate, was all Gina would say. By the time night truly fell, they had seen neither hide nor hair of the brothers, only heard rumors of their whereabouts. Rapunzel was eager to continue their search, but her body was falling apart. She had never walked so much in her life, not even during the cross-country trek on Games Day of 3 years before, when she was pretty sure she had walked half a marathon back and forth from her bedroom to the stove. At least that was the goal of the race, and she had done the calculations twice. I think we'd better bed down for the night, Gina said as Rapunzel walked into a tree for the third time. I'm fine, Rapunzel protested wearily. We'll keep going. Don't villains do their villaining at night? Easier to find. Yeah, but even villains sleep, even your famous Flynn Rider, Gina said cheerfully. Here, this looks like a nice spot. Come on, you make a fire, and I'll go get us some game hens or something for dinner. Rapunzel was immediately fully awake. I'm not going to kill them, she shrieked. No, the other girl said slowly. She frowned at Rapunzel and held up her leather sling. The stone missiles are going to kill them if I do my job right. What's the matter with you? My mother would bring me chickens, and it was my job to kill them, and I hated it. Rapunzel shivered and wrapped her silver hair tightly around her shoulders. Gina stared at her for a moment, obviously trying to process this. Was she trying to teach you to be a good farmer? Like the whole circle of life thing? Know where your food comes from, treat it with respect. If you can't look at your meat in the eye, then you should stick to carrots lesson? Rapunzel almost giggled at that and wasn't sure why. She knew nothing about farming, save what she read in book number 34, The Farmer's Book of Days, and that Gothel generally looked down on it as an occupation. And now that she thought about it, what kind of person brought live animals on long trips to be killed by a young girl at the end of it? Why not wring their necks at home and pack them quiet and unmoving? Why would Gothel do that? Because she wanted to teach another kind of lesson, not about any circle of life. Rapunzel, you're a killer. Or, Rapunzel, see what I can make you do? How come Rapunzel had never just said no? She shivered again and looked down at the fire. I don't think so. Huh. Okay, well, guess I'll just be back in a few, all right? Gina stepped away from their campsite, keeping a close eye on the other girl. Less like she was afraid her first professional job would sneak off into the night, and more like there would be a chance she would do something potentially destructive. Rapunzel pretended not to notice. She made a fire, which would have been fun if she hadn't been so tired. Unlike the closed resource loop of her tower, where she had only what logs were brought to burn, here she could gather as much as she wanted. They weren't cut neatly, but that was all right. Once it was burning nicely, she looked up at the stars directly overhead. That was new. Never in her life had she been able to just look up and see anything besides the mobile she'd made herself to imitate the real stars and planets. Now there was nothing between her and the heavens. She felt the world spin and flung her arms out, digging her fingers firmly into the dirt to steady herself. A warm breeze blew, and for one crazy moment she felt like a bird diving into infinity, into the air that was the warm breath of the celestial spheres. The wind between the stars. It was magic. When Gina came back a couple hours later, Rapunzel was fast asleep and snoring. It took several gentle kicks to wake her. What? Rapunzel sat up, her crazy silver hair even crazier with leaves and twigs. The stars had shifted since she passed out, the heavens whirling above her, unconcerned with sleep. Gina laughed softly. She had already taken care of the small birds she had killed. They were nearly finishing cooking with an improvised spit. There was even some herbs stuffed in them, and that, plus what little fat they had, snapped and sizzled and smelled delicious. Wow, you can do everything, Rapunzel said with frank admiration, and a little bit of drool. I said I lived in the woods with my mom. It's mostly grow or catch whatever you eat. I tried to find you some mushrooms in case your thing about dead birds included eating them, but it hasn't rained in a while, and anyway, the really good ones come later, but I guess it's not an issue. Rapunzel had already taken the stick with the smaller bird and began tearing into it. "Gon go after this?" she asked. No point in wandering around at night and getting lost. It's not safe. Fire will keep away the bears and wolves and other nighttime dangers. We'll rest and be off at first light. Rapunzel considered this. It was the confidence which Gina had spoken that moved her, not arrogance. Just the simple assumption that it was obviously the right thing to do, and anyone else listening would have agreed. Which was strange, considering how Gina had said no one took her seriously, and how hard it was being a young woman in a thug's world. She had sounded very unsure of herself then, despite being well versed in the particulars of the business, hunting for dinner, setting up camp, or to look for their quarry. Did people still reject and ignore her? After dinner, Gina banked the fire and threw the sticks that they had used to cook and eat with into the wood so they wouldn't attract animals. The two sat up for a while, Rapunzel with her back against a tree, Gina watching the glowing coals, her face illuminated dramatically. When she read stories or performed puppet shows, Rapunzel forcibly gave everyone different faces from her own, tried to imagine people different from herself. Gothel had laughed when she once, as a young girl, Rapunzel had painted a family scene in which the children had blue hair. How was she to know the limits of human features? She had literally only seen her mother's black hair, her own silver hair, and brown hair from a few times people had wandered into her field of view from her tower. Now that she had once to study another person, Rapunzel found herself trying not to see how different Gina was. Shorter, darker hair and skin, but just how she was, from an artist's perspective. Lost in thought, not entirely relaxed, there was a flash in the fire deep in her clear brown eyes. "Hey, you got a twig or something caught in your hair there," Gina said, breaking the silence, leaning over to take it out. "Don't touch my hair!" Rapunzel shrieked, scrabbling backward in the dirt. "Whoa, all right, crazy person," Gina said, pulling back with wide eyes. "I wasn't going to. Do I look like that sort of girl who wants to come over and braid your hair or something?" "I'm sorry," Rapunzel said immediately, biting her lip to keep from crying. It's a long story." "I'll say it's long," Gina drawled, her eyes moving very specifically over the lengths of her braids. "Get it?" Rapunzel managed a weak smile. "This got something to do with the whole chickens thing?" Gina asked. "What? No. Why would hair have anything to do with chickens? Or killing them?" Rapunzel said, forcing a laugh. "That's weird, hair killing chickens." Gina narrowed her eyes. "Who said anything about hair killing chickens? I just meant that sort of childhood where your mom made you kill the farmyard animals without a good reason also might have other strange things about it, like you being forced to grow your hair long, not letting anyone touch it, putting weird symbols and jewelry in it like you were raised in a cult or something." No," Rapunzel said. "Sorry, I'm not." "Oh," Gina said carelessly, snuggling down into her cloak. "Then what is the story with your hair anyway? It's such a strange color, and so long." Rapunzel shrugged. "I was born with this color, and I've never cut it." "Huh." She waited for Gina to ask more. Hoped and feared Gina would ask more. But all the other woman said was, "Must be a real pain to keep it out of the way. I mean, it's pretty and all, but I'd probably cut it. Not all of it, maybe. My mom's braid goes down to her knees when she undoes it. Maybe like that." Her words got slower and softer, and were replaced by the end by a quiet breathing that suggested sleep. Rapunzel drifted off uncomfortably, new ideas making her soul itch as they sprouted through her skin.